Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Hello and welcome. I can see some of our subscribers sending me questions. Well, firstly, thank you so much for doing this and joining with me in this, Reporters Direct that we do. As you can understand, I'm now talking from a very difficult place. It's a conflict zone end of the day, but I'm really happy that I could engage with you subscribers. And thank you for all the support and all the good wishes that I'm getting. It really encourages me to, continue with my work. I think we've got a lot of questions. I will not probably be able to answer all of them within the time limit that we have, and considering the kind of sensitivities that I am in. But I believe we do have questions. The questions that I've received so far, I will take the first question from Priyanka Bajaj, and I think she has sent a very good question. Because that's not really what you get to hear in a place like Afghanistan, when people only talk about Taliban, the onslaught, the security situation, violence. But she has asked a question, and thank you for that, Priyanka. With high prevalence of malnutrition in Afghanistan, with women and children being vulnerable, is the local government planning anything in this regard for an emergency nutrition response? Well, as I said, this is a great question. People generally in a conflict zone, we tend to forget that the collateral damage that takes place, right? And we have always seen in terms of any kind of conflict zone around the world, it's the women and the children who suffer the most. And that is where, probably the negligence also happens a lot from the respective governments. And that you can see even happening here in Afghanistan, at least in Kabul, which is the main city. One can see women and children on the road. The abject poverty that you can see really hits you on your face the moment that you land here. So at that time, probably you forget what is happening with you, what can happen to you about your own security. But you really, if you look at their faces, they are not really getting food every day, even if they were getting it earlier. Now situation is going to get worsened. All the supply links that are connected to Kabul, the supply chains, the main roads linking Kabul to other places have sort of been taken over by the Taliban. However, having said that, it is true that there's still kind of news of food shortage and other things have not started. But in general, there is so much of poverty, right? Because these people have been going through war for last 20 years or even more. So, and maybe they will have to see more wars in the future. As we can see, nothing seems to be peaceful as such. So yes, conditions are going to worsen. We are seeing now people from all across Afghanistan are now camping. They are now coming in Kabul and camping in some of the large parks and the squares that are here. They're living in tents, and they're wanting the government to do something. And when you go and talk to them, at least I have met a lot of refugees who are living in a place like Sharina and also in Khair Khana, which is one of the main squares of Kabul city. The women tell me that it is better than if in Kabul we are not being looked after by the government. Nobody has come and met us, and the police is also not giving us security. It's better. And she's from Kunduz, which, as you are aware, has been taken over by the Taliban. She's telling me that and she told me in fact today that I might as well go back to Kunduz and live there if this is the situation, that I'm living on the road with my children. I have no husband. She has 5 children. So situation is really, really dire. I've got good wishes again from Mr. KP Murli. Thank you so much. Your wishes really mean a lot, at least at this point of time, when you see a lot of people getting concerned, but end of the day, they tell you that, what is the point in continuing with it? But end of the day, work is work. And if you have to do your work, you might as well do it with a lot of passion and dedication. So I have another question, but then thank you so much, Prashant, Ambarish, Nikhil Kamra, Suman Majumdar, I've not got questions from you, but I truly appreciate you, registering for this. Then there is Kush Agarwal, Nirjhar Rajawat, Ashish Mohan, thank you so much. KP Murli, I thanked you now. Then there is one question that I can see is quite interesting, and that's what is there in everyone's mind. So I might as well will answer this. This is, how likely is it that the Taliban will take over the country completely? And that comes from Mr. Anil Kumar. Well, thank you so much for this question, Mr. Kumar. I think that's $1 million question as of now, and that's what is there in everyone's mind, not just in Kabul, but in all surrounding areas. And as you are well aware, since we are all following, you're also following the news that is happening and unfolding in Afghanistan, is that 2/3 of this country has already been taken over by them. A lot of commentaries, as you can see, reportage has been they are talking about the fact that, yes, it is probably a kind of Taliban resurgence. Now, having said that, it is also true that the government is trying to, find out some kind of peaceful resolution in which one can have a power sharing deal, so to say, in which the elected Afghan government and the Taliban leaders can have, share the responsibilities between themselves when they come to governing the city. But then what the international community and what even the Ashraf Ghani government is talking about is the fact that the Taliban is trying to take power by force, by military, and that is something that is one that is completely non-negotiable, and which is why we have heard President Ghani giving an address to the nation today, stating that he will continue to stand firm in front of the Taliban offensive. He's talked about boosting the Afghan forces. How far will that be true? Will the coming days will tell us. But yes, this is also true that the Taliban is now 50 kilometers away from the main capital city in Kabul, where I'm presently right now. So an intense fighting is going on. It remains to be seen how that pans out, because parallelly in Doha, Qatar, a peace process, dialogues after dialogues, processes after processes are taking place between the Afghan government and the leaders who are located in Doha. I have an interesting question where I think this is by Mr. Karthik Balasubramanian. He's telling me that, you are taking a ridiculous risk despite being a nascent news organization. Understand your courage, but urge discretion. Wish you a safe journey back home. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Balasubramanian. See, as I said, that, work, end of the day, if you do your work, you might as well do it with a lot of passion and dedication, apart from, of course, the salary that we draw. Having said that, it is also true that yes, we are a nascent organization, but that does not mean that we can't be dedicated to our work and we cannot take challenges, right? So I am at least very thankful to my editor-in-chief, Mr. Shekhar Gupta, managing editor, YP Rajesh, and an entire team in the print, who are like now my back-end support, and I can fall back on them anytime. They had the faith in me to send me here, and I'm happy that I'm able to come at a time when history is being played out, and that's what I think journalism is all about. It's, journalists write the first draft of history. And I think that's what we are trying to do in the print. And that's why I think subscribers like you, you like us, you love us. And that's what makes us going. And for any reporter that is there on the conflict zone, we are in a different state of mind. We do not know what we are doing right now, what we will do next, because nothing can be planned in a war zone like this. So I think what matters most at that point of time is the humongous support that you get from your organization on the back end. While you may not know and see their faces, and only the reporters byline or in the video you can see them, they're taking the risk, which is fine. But at the back end, there are this whole lot of people who are helping you beautify your stories, structuring it meaningfully, and presenting it in front of the readers. Even the video team, I'm sending videos after videos to them without even realizing how they are managing it, but they are managing so well, and I'm so grateful. So while, yes, we're a nascent organization, I do not disagree. But as I said, that does not mean we'll not take challenges and risks. And that is what makes an organization a big organization, not just the size, but the kind of work that you do. So thank you for that. Then we have a question from Ms. Sujata Jayarajan. Thank you for writing in, ma'am. You've said that India has been avoiding direct contact with Taliban for its own reasons. Is it time to rethink our strategy? Well, I would say this is one question that I had been dealing with before coming here when I was in Delhi reporting because I covered diplomacy, foreign affairs, and strategic affairs. So yes, I've been writing for last couple of months or maybe more than that how India has stated very clearly that it is in a way talking to all stakeholders, which essentially means that it is talking to the Taliban, which is ready to sort of reconciliate, right? There is, we might say, and there is this commentary going on that the Taliban is the same, doesn't matter who's sitting in Doha or the fighters, the insurgents who are fighting on the street. Having said that, this is also true that India has been always promoting an Afghan-led, Afghan-owned process. And then our External Affairs Minister, India's External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, was part of the intra-Afghan dialogue when it started in Doha in September 2020. So he was there in the first round, and he gave his inaugural remarks, in which he stated very clearly that India stands for everything in Afghanistan as long as it ultimately the outcome is peace. So if peace comes in these in the joining of the two, which is the Afghan government and the Taliban leaders, then so be it. And that's what India had been doing. We have heard the Minister of External Affairs even stating recently during a media briefing this past week, is that India is talking to all stakeholders. International community is doing so. We've seen China doing so, Turkey doing that, Iran, Russia, Pakistan. So all the neighbors, the Central Asian countries, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, they're all doing it. Just to the fact that once the US withdrawals and they completely exit by August 31st, and that will happen before August 31st. I mean, I'm sitting in Kabul and I can hear those roaring Chinooks going over my head all the time and in the Kabul skies. It's a common sight. They are evacuating the US embassy. So all these neighbors are now coming together and see how they can support. So yes, India has been talking, but in a different manner through their own different channels. Every country is doing what they think is the best to bring this to parties together. I hope that answers your question. Then we have. Okay, so Mr. Murli has he sent a question. What is the real control Taliban has in areas they claim to have captured? Are these likely to be transitional, tactical? Where do Afghan Defense Forces stand? Why is that these places are falling? So, Mr. Murli, I really sincerely hope I will be able to answer this question. I will not go into many details and nitty-gritties since I'm already here and there is a security aspect to it. I'll be happy to take more such questions once I'm back in Delhi and once I'm able to talk more freely, because I hope you understand that the situation right now is very critical. One never knows what is happening. But to answer your question, yes, the Taliban is taking control. control provincial capitals one after another, villages. In some places, what we understand from local reports is that the governors are also giving up. They're surrendering because beyond a point, they realize that maybe this is the best option, and maybe this is the time to give Taliban to a chance to sort of come back. It is also true that some are fleeing the country. They are going to other places, other countries, which they believe is more secured. But then again, let's remember, those are very rich people who can do that. It's not easy for a middle class or a lower middle class person in this country to just go and apply for a visa and, let's say, go and settle in a Turkey or Uzbekistan or anywhere. So that's the reality of it. When I do this again, after I come back, I'll probably be able to give you a larger and a more clearer picture as to why the cities are falling. The Afghan forces are fighting. In some cases, they are also giving up. I have interviewed a soldier, if you've watched my video, from Pule Khumri in near Mazar-e-Sharif, which is one of the main entry points to the main city. And there the soldiers, they tell me that, we are constantly fighting the Taliban, and they were right there about, 2 kilometers, 4 kilometers away, beyond a chalk that was there around about. And I could hear firing going on while I was interviewing that soldier. And I don't know, I mean, he had this courage that, yes, we will be able to, push them back. And they've been able to do that. We know that there are local, regional, strong men like Ata Muhammad Noor and his sons and his militia group, who are really fighting it out along with the Afghan forces. So in some places they are successful, in some places they are not. Because we need to understand that Afghan society is very different. Their ethnicities are very deep, very entrenched, right? We have the Pashtuns, the Uzbeks, the Tajiks, and the Hazaras. And within them, there is this thing that, probably the Pashtuns want the Taliban to come back because that's from where they mainly comprise of. And within the Hazaras, there is a division within the Tajiks. They do not want the Taliban to come back. So the situation is much more complex than we can even fathom as to what is going on. So, but then thank you for that question. I have Miss Divya Samadar giving me a good compliment. Thank you so much, ma'am. It means a lot. What is the root cause of animosity among Taliban and common citizens, present leaders of different regions, supporters? So I think I just answered that question. Mr. Mulli had also posed. I think, as I said, one has to understand how the Afghan society is and how ethnicities here work. They are people who really are very, very, strong about their own identity. I mean, I think we Indians are, right? So when I was in Mazar-e-Sharif, and I went there for a day or two when it was getting inevitable that probably Mazar-e-Sharif will fall, but it did not, thankfully, to the Taliban. So there were these people in Mazar-e-Sharif. I was out there on the streets. You can watch my video where I've said that, people there, they were all surrounding me because they, I'm a foreigner to them. And they were asking me that, why are you here? Why are you doing this kind of reportage? We are not scared. Why are you scared? So they told me that they are among us. Let them come in. Let them rule. Let either it is Ghani government or Taliban or whoever rules. What we need is development. What we need are jobs. What we need is a better future. And none of them, if they cannot give it to us, then what's the point? And if they can give it to us, so be it. It's good. So that's how it works. I mean, it's not really. We sitting in India or maybe an American sitting in America can have a perspective that, okay, this Taliban is like this mercenary enemy. But frankly, in Afghanistan, not everyone, I would say a large chunk of people, they don't think like that. So let me take some questions here as well. I have, okay, this. so many questions. Can we expect an interview with the Taliban from one of their hideouts? Very concerned about your safety and good wish as well. Well, that's quite ironical. You want my safety, and yes, I mean it's not always easy to do these things while you're out there on the field. It's not that in the print we try to give all aspects from all stakeholders, and this is what our editor-in-chief always tells us, that reportage cannot be one-sided. So you need to got to have a clinical approach to things. But yes, I have got your interview from General Atta Mohammad Noor, and he's a hugely influential character who is sort of seen as this fighter who's putting the last effort amongst all other strongmen that you have. And you'll see the use of word called warlords mostly in books and Western media. So he's the one who's really putting up a brave fight. So I've done that. But to get an interview with the Taliban, well, I would not say that I have not reached out to them. But then again, beyond a point, you cannot push it. So let's just see. Let's hope I'll be able to give you that as well. I have a question. Why local people have not raised guns to support the government? Well, that's not true. And that's from to Raj Deka. No, the local people, as I said, General Mohammad Atta Noor, then there is, Rashid Dostum, there is Gulbuddin Hikmatyar. There are many people who have taken up arms, who've been taking up arms for several years. So they sometimes fight along with the Taliban, they sometimes fight with the Taliban. So you have to understand the history, the great game that has gone on in this country for a long, long time. Right from the Russian invasion, the way the British came, so everything, all that is being played out every time that the situation in Afghanistan worsens. And then, of course, you have this American war on terror. And we get to hear now the Americans are telling us that, the war is ended because they have rooted out Al-Qaeda, which is not true. Because, we've seen reports and several other research reports that Al-Qaeda is very much yes. And that is what I think the Dr. Abdullah, who's the key, peace negotiator who goes to Doha as part of the Afghan government, because he's the chairman of that High Council for Peace. He had stated, 2 days back when there was this dialogue in Doha, the extended troika that was hosted with Russia, Pakistan, and US and others, is that the international community should understand that if they don't come forward and help the Afghan government at this point of time, it will have an adverse impact on India and other countries around the world, with international terrorist organizations raising its head again. So that's what he had stated. So to come back to your question, yes, people are raising arms, and but beyond a point, what can you do? You need to also live a life of dignity. You have people here like us in Delhi. They are concerned about their jobs. They are concerned about raising their children. They are concerned about their education. So taking up arms is really not the solution at this point of time. If you ask me personally. Arijit Chakravarti, why is India caught on the wrong foot again in Afghanistan, or this just anxiety in the media? And we knew this for long, that India don't have much role to play with. To begin with, our position and power was dependent on Americans. Mr. Chakravarti, I do not know why you are making that assessment, but I would not disagree, because if that's your personal opinion. But if you really follow things closely in the last 20 years, how things have panned out, the Americans intervened here after the 9/11. their intelligence report told them that, the Al-Qaeda that carried out the 9/11, Osama bin Laden, has been given shelter by Taliban in Afghanistan. And that's how everything sort of unfolded, right? When it comes to India, I don't think India was ever dependent on Americans. No. In fact, India has been one of the largest aid giver in South Asia, which goes anywhere between $3 to $5 billion. We've built a dam for them, a parliament house for them, and many other projects that are still underway. And well, I do not know if they will be completed with the situation that is unfolding. And the Taliban never said that they will be, harming them in any which way. But let's just understand that how India played its role. Playing a role does not always mean that you have to arm people or you have to send your troops, or you have to, a military intervention is not the solution, if that's what you mean. Now, I'm sorry if I'm getting you wrong, but India has done a lot of support that it could possibly give to Afghanistan, be it Narendra Modi government, be it before that under Manmohan Singh. So we've seen that, how Afghanistan, when it comes to Afghanistan, India has been regarded as one of the stakeholders when it comes to development of this country. And frankly, I am here right now talking to people, talking to local people out here. And that's what my purpose of coming here was, that, let's just understand from the common Afghan woman, man, a child on the road, people who live here, people who believe that whatever it is, this is our country and we have to stay. When I talk to them, and when I tell them that I'm from India, first they say that, oh, you're a foreigner. Then I say, yes, I'm a foreigner, but I'm from India. They're like, oh, no, then you're not a foreigner, you're an Indian. And let me tell you that this is such a conservative society. When they see that, there's an Indian journalist who's covering this war zone all alone by herself. Unfortunately, my camera person never could get the visa, so I've been this so-called one-man army doing things. But I have got so much support from local people, I can't even begin to tell you. Right from the driver who drives me around, he doubles up his job as a translator, because I don't understand Persian or Pashto, and he's translating that for me. He's, whatever English he can help me with. He knows Hindi. Many people know Hindi here because of Bollywood. They love all the songs, the latest songs, and of course, it goes without saying that Shah Rukh Khan is a favorite for them. But then, yes, I mean, Deepika Padukone. So if my driver is feeling a little low and he's tired with the whole day's work that he's doing with me, I show him Deepika Padukone's Instagram page, and he gets so excited. So India has a different connotation in this country altogether, and I've seen that. I'm now experiencing it every single day. So when people tell me, come back, something can happen to you, which I understand where they're coming from, and I'm not discounting it at all. I do understand that I need to get back home safely. But when I see the confidence that people give in me, the common man, and I'm not talking about, this officials in the ministries or whatever, but the common man here whom I've never met. I was in a school in Mazar-e-Sharif to cover a school. You'll be seeing that report very soon. The children there opened up so much when they heard that I'm an Indian. The principal came and she wanted to speak to me. So India has a different image here altogether, which I think has been built by India and Indians and the support that we've given them. We have never depended on Americans for that. I cannot even begin to tell you the kind of image that America has in this country, which probably will keep for the next round of discussions. So I'm sorry I'm taking a lot of time to give each answer, but thank you. If I'm not able to take all the questions, Anirudh Sarkar, very brave decision to report from war zone. Well, thank you so much, but it's just, the job of a reporter. I'm just doing my job. But as I said, I have a fantastic team back home in Delhi. the way they are supporting me, I can't even begin to tell you how thankful I am to them, and I will be all my life. The kind of work that they are doing, be it editing my stories or editing my videos, I'll always be grateful to them. Then I have, what is the additional security layer provided to journalists covering stories in Afghanistan? Also, when are you planning to come back? Rashi Chandola, well, thank you so much for this question. Ms. Chandola, the fact is, well, I'll come back when my work gets over. So, everyone's working. Let me tell you that. Yes, the situation is really, really bad and it's deteriorating every single day. The Taliban is fighting about 50 kilometers from this Kabul city, from where I'm talking to you. But let's just understand that, there are many others on the road, the normal Afghani people who are here. The Afghans who talk to me give me a lot of inspiration when I look at the eyes of the children who don't even know what is going on, but then they just give us an innocent smile at me when they look at me, when they peep through my car windows. It just I can't tell you the kind of emotion that runs through me. That if I'm fearing so much and I'm dreading to go back home, these guys are living it, right? They are living the war. They are living it day in, day out. The women, you would not believe the kind of amazing grit that they have. They know their men can be taken away, anything can be happened to them. They'll be dragged out of their homes. Women themselves have so much of insecurity, and I don't have to tell you what women go through. And if the Taliban comes in, don't know what will happen to them. But look at them. But then they are smiling, enjoying, listening to songs, going by with their lives, going to schools, and everything is normal with them. But they know that while we are in this, let's say, shopping for something or eating in a restaurant, suddenly a rocket can come in and I'll be gone. But then they have taken it, in their stride. I'm not saying that I have to live with them like that, but that definitely gives you a lot of support, and the fact that you need to report about them. You cannot always see one side of the story. There is this story also of encouragement that you get from the ground out here. So thank you for that. Ashok Upadhyay, appreciate your courage and commitment to your profession. Take care. Well, thank you so much. I'm taking care of my safety, of course. My company, as I said, is giving me humongous support. And so that makes me go every single day. So thank you for that. Jaideep Gadvi, how many Afghans face a tough choice between disinterested Kabul government and an extremist Taliban? Well, see, there you go. They don't really live things like that. For them, they're living a war. So whoever can end the war, it's the best for them, right? But I think now they are into this habit of living war. This country is flush with arms. I have seen, and I would not name those places where I have gone, where you can see Kalashnikovs rifles being sold like potatoes and onions. People are bargaining them and all that. So we know the kind of, and we know that this is also how it has over the years become hotbed of terrorism. We hear that, how terrorism is being, sort of exported here. We've heard governments talking about how Pakistan is probably aiding it. There are others aiding it. One never knows what is going on end of the day. But yes, they don't have a choice. I mean, for them, this is not a choice, whether a Kabul government or an extremist Taliban. The choice is for them is peace. Who is that person, that group, who will bring them peace, who will tell them that, okay, while you are walking on the road, a rocket will not fall. There'll be no magnetic bombs that will be fitted in your car. So, who will give them that assurance? So that's the question. Then I have a question from Akshit Reddy. It's not that we don't care about your safety, it's just more curiosity and trying to know about their idea of Afghanistan. More than the interview, we need your safety. Sorry for that. No, you don't have to be sorry for that question at all. Good that you did that question. And, that is why I'm here for, just to understand and get views from everyone. But I'm sure you understand that at this point of time, when people are talking about the fact that, Kabul can fall any moment, everyone is sort of scared. People whom I'm talking to, even women in beauty parlors, and that is why I made sure that when I'm here, while I'm in Kabul, I should visit a beauty parlor and to understand how women are thinking. And I think that gives me the kind of leverage that probably a male journalist will not have. I over Twitter, over other social media platforms, I've been asked, my editor has been asked time and again, why has he sent a female journalist? Well, I think that is where people should be sorry about, because there's nothing called male and female. But let me tell you, being a female, although you are in a conservative society like this, while you have to cover your head all the time, it does give you a lot of access where male journalists are not able to go. So as I was saying, I went into a beauty parlor, I took some of their services, and then I asked them. They opened up and they told me that, tomorrow this beauty parlor may be forever shut. My job will be gone. I will be sitting at home because Taliban do not want women to work, and nobody knows how the so-called new Taliban is going to be. But going by history and going by precedents, the Taliban doesn't want the women to work. So, but then today you see women in Kabul smartly dressed up. Yes, their heads are covered, but then they are very smartly dressed. They're talking English. They're doing fantastic, giving you fantastic beauty services that one can not even imagine in beauty parlors of India. So this is also a reality that we need to understand. There are restaurants here who give you fabulous pizzas that you can't even imagine having that kind of pizza at such a low cost in India. So that's why one has to be here, and you don't have to be sorry for any question. You can ask me anything that you want. Mr. Mulli, thank you. You're saying fantastic coverage. As a female journal, you are well positioned, as you rightly said. Just, please do make a very elaborate coverage once you're back. Yes, of course, that's the plan, and that's what my team will be also working on. That once I go back, I will be able to give you a more clearer picture. I do not know by that time what will happen to Kabul, but I plan to, understand before I leave as to where is it heading to. I don't think I can get a clearer picture. Nobody knows what is happening here. One can see on Kabul streets hectic, kind of convoys moving around the Ark Palace where President Ghani lives. One can not even bring out their, take their mobile out and, take some photos. At least when I did that, for a short while, for 5 minutes, I got arrested. But then, my chauffeur who was driving me down from the airport to the place that I'm living in, he said, but she's a journalist. So then they said that, no, we have to arrest her. Why was she taking photos of these convoys? So then, he was very, very harsh. So we got a little scared, but then my chauffeur suddenly said that, she's an Indian. And they were like, wow, she's an Indian. Oh, well, then she can take a good photo. But then, she should not market it that much. But thank you. And so glad that somebody has come from India to see the security situation here. So it's that kind of experience that really makes you to go further and understand the situation and bring in front of you what Afghanistan is. So I'll take the last question. This is from Nikhil Kamra. Again, with Western countries, primarily European Union countries, being concerned about an influx of refugees, what are the chances that countries like Pakistan will receive funding to hold or house Afghan refugees to prevent these refugees from heading to Europe? Well, I do not know what you exactly meant by that, Mr. Kamra, but let's understand, yesterday the UN had come out with a statement how this refugee crisis is now going to simply explode. I have covered the refugees over here who are coming in hordes in Kabul. It is heart-wrenching to see the condition of children. It just absolutely breaks your heart. They are planning to go anywhere that any country will accept them. In fact, when I was coming back from Mazar-e-Sharif to Kabul and my flight was late by 7 hours, there were rumors going around that the airport will be taken over by Taliban while I was still sitting there, and I was, alone as a journalist there. So some girls came in and they befriended me. We chatted a lot about Shah Rukh Khan and who's better, Amitabh Bachchan, Shah Rukh Khan, or Ranveer Kapoor. But end of the day, what they said is that none of the countries are willing to take us. Where will we go? And we are this middle class people. We don't have money to pay for the visa and for families that we have, and they have very large families, about 15, 16, 18 members. So for them is like, who will take us? Will India take us? Will Pakistan take us? Will Turkey take us? What will happen to us? So we might as well stay back in this country and we'll see what can be done. And these are young, promising girls who are very bright in their studies. Somebody is studying medicine, somebody is studying journalism, someone was preparing for her modeling career, and she was beautiful, let me tell you. But the question for them all the time is, where will we go? And so all they could do is that they requested me if I can help them getting the visa. They're so desperate. So the situation is, at this point of time, if you ask me personally, one should understand where they are coming from. And if you really think that Taliban is an enemy who can ruin this country, then you might as well get your acts together. Or maybe the Taliban is not. Maybe they'll be different, who knows? But when it comes to refugees, I don't think any country should say no to them. Then I have, I think that is like my really last question. So that's like, before I head on for my work, thanks and be safe. If you can, I just wish to know, after losing Shabargan, our Dostam's forces shifted their might at Mazar-e-Sharif. So these people, they continue to fight wherever they think it is key to keep pushing the Taliban back. Let me tell you, you must have seen the defense line in which I was in, the city limits of Mazar-e-Sharif, where it was huge. It was huge, and huge fight was going on, and that is what the fighting will continue to be at this point of time. Dostam and others will be fighting. Let's just see where they go. But end of the day, they need to make peace with the Taliban, because otherwise I do not see, as what President Joe Biden has also stated, that their country has to be left at their hands. But it's not easy for and it's not right for the Americans also to say, because you fought the war here, this was your battlefield. And you don't leave the battlefield like that, saying that, okay, now you see for yourself. But, things are complex. Nobody can say straight away that, this person or that person, that country or this country is to be blamed. But I think end of the day, now they have to take a call. They have a proper government, elected government. Rumors are flying high. What happens to President Ghani if he's going to step down? Maybe the next 1 week, 10 days will be crucial, and we'll be all watching it, and you will get those reports from the print for sure. I will be getting them. If not, as I said, my backend team is here who will always keep you updated. So thank you so much for this live. Let me tell you, I'm going to come back again once I come back to Delhi, and we do this with more questions and for a longer period. So thank you so much. Keep watching the coverage that we'll be giving you from Afghanistan. As I said, the refugee story is going to be out soon. The Mazar-e-Sharif school that I covered, it may come a little late, but it'll also come. And there'll be several other interviews that are lined up. I hope that, it happens, because as I said, please bear with me. This is a conflict zone. So maybe today one interview is confirmed, and and it just the next day it changes because of the situation here. Anything can happen at any moment. So bear with us, bear with the print, and thank you so much for putting your faith in us, and keep watching our YouTube channel and news portal. And please take care, because we are still under a pandemic here. Nobody cares because they're fighting a war, but the pandemic is still there. So stay safe. Thank you so much.